Think you've got food sensitivities figured out because you cut out gluten and dairy? Think again. In this myth-busting episode, I expose the unexpected foods secretly sabotaging your health. Foods that might even be considered, quote, healthy. From nightshades to certain fruits, from certain health foods to common spices. I reveal the surprising culprits behind persistent symptoms that just won't quit. So if you've made all the dietary changes but still don't feel your best, this episode will revolutionize your understanding of food reactions and put you on the path to true healing. So stay tuned. Hey friend, welcome to Gut Fix. Are you ready to finally get rid of those debilitating digestive symptoms? Do you catch yourself staying up late Googling things like, what can I eat? Or how do I stop a flare? Or maybe you're just lying awake wondering, how did this ever happen to me? I'm Wendy, and I've been exactly where you are, desperately searching for answers, but determined to find natural solutions. And like you, I was overwhelmed by all the conflicting information out there and unsure of what might really work for me. And so now in this podcast, I'm here to share with you what I've learned, how to listen to your body's signals, and uncover the common mistakes that might be standing in the way of your healing. So grab your favorite drink, pop in your earbuds, and let's dive into your health transformation together. Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Gut Fix. So I'm your host, Wendy Handy, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and someone who personally overcame ulcerative colitis without pharmaceuticals and partially by identifying my specific food triggers. So today I want to dive into a topic that might completely change how you think about healthy eating. I'm going to go beyond the usual suspects of gluten and dairy and explore some of the surprising foods that could be causing your inflammation. And if you've already tried eliminating the most common culprits, like gluten and dairy, but you still kind of experience some mysterious symptoms, then this episode is especially for you. But even if you're just curious about the complex relationship between food and inflammation, you're going to find some fascinating food plot twists ahead. But before we dive in, I do want to share a quick personal story that illustrates today's topic. So when I was first diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and began that health detective journey, I did what so many people did. I immediately eliminated gluten and dairy. And yes, I did feel somewhat better, but the plot twist is that I was still having flare-ups and couldn't figure out why. Because I was eating what I thought was an incredibly clean diet with lots of fresh vegetables, fruits that were organic, lean proteins, and what I would consider to be an anti-inflammatory diet and foods. But it wasn't until I went beyond the elimination diet and got a comprehensive food sensitivity test that I discovered some things that were shocking to me that were actually triggers. And one of my most inflammatory foods was actually spinach. Yep, spinach. And that was a food that I was eating all the time because I was adding it to my daily smoothies and thinking that I was actually healing my body when I was actually triggering inflammation. So another surprise one is turmeric. That golden anti-inflammatory spice that everybody raves about was causing reactions for me personally because of a compound it contains called salicylate. And I was actually taking a supplement that to help reduce the inflammation, and it was actually contributing to it. So this experience taught me a very powerful lesson that I've since seen confirmed with, so many of my clients, that when it comes to food sensitivities, there's really no universal good or bad foods. What triggers inflammation is very highly individual, and sometimes the healthiest foods on paper can be very problematic for specific individuals. And so I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room. The intense focus that's out there on gluten and dairy in so many discussions about food sensitivities. And there's no question that these are very common triggers for so many people. And by eliminating them, it does help a significant percentage of individuals, reduce those inflammatory symptoms. But here's the problem. This focus has created a situation where many people stop investigating. And after trying, say, gluten-free, dairy-free diet, if they feel better, that's great. But if they still have symptoms, they often don't know where to go next, right? And so even worse than that, some people eliminate these foods and they don't feel any different. And that leads them to believe that food sensitivities aren't their issue. And in reality, it's just that their specific triggers might come from completely different foods. And so now let's talk about what I call the healthy food paradox. And the surprising reality that foods generally considered nutritious and beneficial can be significant inflammation triggers for certain individuals. And there's a couple of categories that really fall into that. And foods that frequently show up on sensitivity triggers in, tests. And the first one is nightshades. It's the family that includes tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, even white potatoes. And they contain compounds called alkaloids. And those can trigger inflammatory responses in certain individuals that are susceptible to that. I had a friend, Eva, who completely eliminated gluten and dairy, had minimal improvement. But when she removed the nightshades based on her test results, her joint pain decreased by about 80% within 3 weeks. The next one is high histamine foods. So foods like your fermented vegetables, aged cheeses, bone broth, and even leftover proteins can have a very high in histamine, or they can trigger, a histamine response. And though, even though these foods are often recommended for gut health, they can cause significant reactions in people with histamine intolerance. And then FODMAPs. So FODMAPs are they're fermentable carbohydrates, and they're found in a lot of fruits, vegetables, grains, including several that are typically considered super healthy, like, garlic, onions, apples, cauliflower. They're all very high FODMAP foods that can trigger significant digestive distress in, individuals that are sensitive to that. And then you have oxalate-rich foods. So those are your foods like spinach, beets, almonds, even chocolate. That's all very high in oxalates. And that can cause problems for some people. Remember my spinach story? I am far from alone in reacting to this supposed superfood, right? And then lectins. You may have heard a lot about lectins. Lectins are plant proteins, and they're found in highest concentrations in your legumes, grains, and your nightshade vegetables. And even though beans and whole grains are typically considered to be heart-healthy foods, their lectin content can actually trigger inflammatory responses in some people. And so you may be wondering, why do these supposedly healthy foods cause problems for some people, but not others? And there are several factors at play. So first, you have your genetic variations. We all have, slightly different genetic coding that affects how we process certain compounds in foods. So for example, some people have genetic variations that affect how they metabolize histamine or oxalates, or even salicylates, like I mentioned earlier. And then you have gut microbiome differences. The unique composition of bacteria in your gut significantly influences how you react to different foods. So your microbiome helps to break down certain food compounds and imbalances that can lead to increased reactivity. And then your immune system programming. So your immune system develops memories of substances that it's encountered throughout your life. And, that could include previous infections, exposures, or even stress can program your immune system to react to certain food proteins. And then you have your total load concept. Often it's not one single food causing problems, but the cumulative effect of multiple minor triggers, plus, other stressors like your environmental toxins, your sleep deprivation, or, your emotional stress. And this explains why sometimes you can eat a food occasionally with, no issues whatsoever, but eating it all the time or frequently will push you over your inflammatory threshold. So, there are, like I mentioned earlier, the elimination diets, right? So given how individual food sensitivities are, you can probably see why standard elimination diets often yield very inconsistent results. When you eliminate gluten and dairy, but are actually reacting to, say, almonds or garlic, you might see partial improvement if coincidentally you've reduced, eating the actual triggers, or you might see no improvement at all. And even more comprehensive approaches like the autoimmune protocol or low FODMAP diets, they're all based on, population statistics, not individual, right? So foods that commonly cause problems rather than your unique biology. And this is why even the most detailed food journaling can actually lead to confusion, because the delayed nature of food sensitivity reactions, that can be really up to 72 hours, makes it nearly impossible to connect specific foods to specific symptoms without using a proper test, right? So this brings us to why and what I consider to be the game changer in addressing food sensitivities. And that is the comprehensive test that identifies your unique inflammatory triggers. So unlike standard allergy testing that only identifies immediate, potentially life-threatening reactions, comprehensive food sensitivity testing reveals delayed inflammatory responses to a very wide range of foods, food chemicals, additives, and things like that. And the testing process is very straightforward. It typically involves, a few, 5 in the one that I recommend, blood spots, small blood drips, right? And they're analyzed for immune reactions to 176 different foods and, food additives and chemicals. And the results provide a very personalized map for your specific triggers, allowing you to make that targeted dietary change rather than just eliminating foods unnecessarily that, may not even cause you anything. And I've seen this approach transform the outcome for clients who, previously felt stuck in the cycle of symptom management and food fear, right? Instead of restricting more and more foods based on, generic advice, these clients can now focus specifically on their actual triggers and enjoy a very diverse diet of non-reactive foods. And so what can you do with all this information? Well, here's one simple action step that you can take for this week. Instead of immediately jumping into eliminating more foods, trying to keep a symptom and circumstances journal, something like that, for just 1 week, record not just what you eat, but all the circumstances around any symptoms that come up. So that could be the time of day, that could be any stress that you have going on and your level of stress, how well you slept, any environmental factors. So the broader perspective and looking at all of these factors can help you identify patterns and consider whether certain healthy foods might be worth looking into as a potential trigger. And so, I want you to look especially for foods that you eat all the time or that you crave and have an intense craving for it, because these are often your hidden culprits. And if you're ready to move beyond the guesswork and discover, what your unique food triggers are, book your free 30-minute discovery call. You can go to the show notes below and click on the link down there, or you can go to my website, wendyhandy.com, and book there. Also, be on the lookout. I am working on something that should be finished by the end of this month. And once I get all the kinks worked out, but it will be something that is very exciting based around this food sensitivity test. And so, the food sensitivity test identifies your body's specific inflammatory responses to 176 different foods, food chemicals, additives, and that's going to give you a very clear, actionable data about your unique triggers, including the healthy foods that might be causing problems for your individual biology. And so as we wrap up today's episode, I want to emphasize that the goal here isn't to make you afraid of any healthy foods. It's quite the opposite. The goal is to help you identify the specific foods that are healthy for your unique body, and so that you can enjoy a very diverse, nutritious diet without triggering inflammation. And remember, there's no universally good or bad foods when it comes to food sensitivities. Only foods that work well or don't work well based on your individual biology. And the foods that don't work for you today might not be off limits forever, especially if you get to and address the underlying gut health issues that might be, causing them. And so if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and hit the subscribe button, leave a review, share it with anybody that you know that might get value out of this. Your support does help other people struggling with any mysterious symptoms to find this information. And so until next week, I want to remind you that the path to feeling better might involve some surprising food plot twists, but with the right information, you can navigate those twists and turns with confidence. Until next week, stay happy and stay healthy. Hey friend, I hope today's episode brought you some real value. If it did, would you take just 30 seconds to share it with a friend who might be struggling to get her gut in check? And if you're feeling extra generous, leave me a review on Apple. It absolutely lights me up knowing that this podcast is making a difference for you. All right, it's time for me to grab my protein shake and get my gut happy. I'll see you back here next Tuesday for another episode of Gut Fix. And until then, stay happy and stay healthy.